Hi, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy late evening where you're at, or happy late morning or late afternoon where you're at. This is the Musings of a Sanguine Woman. And the Sanguine Woman here is Adeolua by name. And usually I don't really plan to do podcasts like I say, oh, I'm going to be doing podcasts every Monday or every Tuesday. No, it's when I find that there is so much going on, like I'm on a topic and I have so much to say about it. Instead of just talking to myself, I decide that let me talk into a podcast I can post for anyone who cares to listen. And if you're listening, thank you very much for stopping by. Thank you. Out of your busy schedule, you could be, schedule, whichever applies where you're at. You could be doing any other thing. Sleeping, for instance, you know what I mean? But you're here, you're listening in. I'm grateful, thank you. And if you have any questions, any suggestions, any criticism, any corrections, or like contributions, maybe you've listened to one or two things in previous episodes or other episodes and you feel that you want to say something to me about it, maybe you want to correct something or you want to add to what has been said, please send me a voice message. I really appreciate that. Send me a voice message. That would be great. That would be wonderful. I will look forward to receiving your voice messages, wherever you are at, suggestions, whatever. Thank you. So this is one issue that I want to talk about right now. It is very controversial. It is a hot potato for everybody concerned. Hardly do people want to talk about this. And I think it's just people playing ostrich about the situation. I've never really come out to really talk about it because a lot of people have already talked about it already. And they're seen as conspiracy theorists and all. Well, what's wrong with being a conspiracy theorist is my talk. But it's not conspiracy theory as far as I'm concerned. I don't even know why I had to put that intro there, but I didn't want to say that it was conspiracy theory or anything. I didn't want to say all that. I just wanted to dive into it. So that is what I'm just going to do. Dive into it. There is this thing, and I'm glad that the gap between there is been a bridge now, bridges actually, that is connecting people of the Black race together from all over the world. And I think that social media has had a very good impact on that. And so now you have the principalities and the people of darkness of this world who have tried to misinform Black people in different places. It was easy then because it's what the media tells you that is the truth. You don't have access to books unless it is allowed in your country. And people wrote books, but it is one thing to write a book, quite another thing for it to be published. And please, now that we have social media, this is the time, like I've said, do start podcasts, speak your mind, speak what you believe your truth is. There are so many, especially if you're a Christian, you understand this is not the time to keep mum. The Bible says, go ye into the world and preach the gospel. You understand? You have people of other faiths on all social media platforms, on all broadcasting, personal broadcasting platforms and all of that, where you can start your own radio and all of that. And you, as a Christian, you're just there. You're not going out and preaching the gospel. You are saying your life is the gospel. Well, talk to us about your life. If your life is the gospel, talk to us about your life, which is what I try to do. I talk about my thoughts. That's why I call this the Musings of a Sanguine Christian Woman. So I talk about my thoughts. That's like And there is no way the gospel has not shaped how I think or how I process things. Anyways, that's that about that. Also write books, please. Sometimes it's your journal. You understand? It doesn't have to be something quote and unquote profound, you know? I mean, I'm talking to myself too. I need to write a book, like, even if it's just my thoughts, you know? And that is even the point of this whole book thing. It's writing your thoughts. It would help somebody, you know? Somebody out there would read it and be like, I thought I was the only one who thinks this way. Thank God that I found somebody else who thinks like that. And then somebody gets healing, somebody gets clarity from that, somebody gets a sense of community from that, because usually one of the things that kill people from inside out is the fact that they feel they are alone in their own world, and it sort of makes them feel like, why am I still here? I'm like the only one out there who thinks like this and all of that. And I have found that to not be true, right? I found that to not be true. So you have a situation where when you're on social media and all, you get to see people like yourself there that you can just join yourself to, listen to, and it makes you feel like you are in a village, truly. All right. Speaking of villages, I am glad that Black people are connecting more to one another from different parts of the world. The issue of colorism is being discussed in India. Well, maybe not in India specifically. You find people who like the Indian culture being very, very touchy about that subject. And I think when people don't talk about a problem and instead they digress, oh my goodness, if I have to learn diplomacy, I think I have to learn it from an Indian. When you're talking about something they don't want to talk about, they talk about everything else but that. I noticed. They talk about everything else but that. And then they go, you don't understand what we've been through and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, okay, but you don't understand. I guess I may not understand what you have been through as an Indian. We've read stories, we've watched your movies, so we have a pretty mild idea, because no matter how much we see in movies, it can never compare to the experiences of those who went through it, who died in the middle of all the struggles that the Indian people have been through since it was the Bharat subcontinent. So yes, the Indian people have been through hell. Literally, they've been through hell. There's always, when a conquering kingdom comes through, or Luther or Moroder, as the way it may, of course, they don't call themselves Luthers or Moroders, they call themselves a kingdom. And so they sweep through the Bharat subcontinent, they practically sweep through it, because all the jewels kind of vanish as they go through the place, and they've had that problem for centuries. In a span of 1,000 years, they've had several kingdoms sweep. That's the most diplomatic way I can put it. Sweep through them several times, right? And it has left a very rich subcontinent poor at every time. The moment they try to get on their feet again, you have someone pushing them down. Now, there are so many reasons for that. But that is not, I don't think it's the time for me to go into that right now, but I used that as an example at first because I talked about colorism. Now, colorism is like the sibling to racism. In the sense that you find a lot of skin lightening this, skin lightening that. The fact that you still have skin lightening anything or bleaching anything in India is a testament to the fact that colorism is alive and kicking. And I remember watching, was it Jubilee the other day, where the topic was being black in India. And they all talked about their struggles. Everyone had a different perspective. Obviously, that is the point of having the Jubilee thing, where they have people of the same circumstance, but they have a different mindset to it, different experiences. Some of them, the being black in India, some of them were indigenously black, indigenous Indians, actually. They were born there, their ancestors are Indians, as the case may be, but they are black. And because they are black, they are seen as strangers. They are often treated as strangers. And someone said something there that really touched me. Everything else touched me, really, but that one stuck with me in the sense that they felt, unlike America, where they can protest and talk about Black Lives Matter, like talking about Black Lives Matter in India is almost impossible, because in the diversity that makes up India, Black people seem like the minority. And so it's like, who is going to listen when you say Black Lives Matter in a place like that? Like, you could practically get lost and be lost in that, because there are so many people and too many people, which is why I wish they had all stayed in their respective ethnicities and kingdoms and just have a joint force instead of having and just have a joint force, right? And everybody is a king or a what is it called? Every ethnicity is represented, every kingdom is represented, and all of that. I have no problem. It's funny that all the kingdoms that conquered them, well, tried to conquer them is more like it. All the kingdoms that tried to conquer them, they told them that they need a democratic, no monarchy system. But these same people, they have, is it the Arabs, for example, they have kings. You understand? Their kings are their presidents and their prime ministers, and their kings are the law. Do you understand what I'm saying? Their kings are the law. In predominantly Muslim societies, you have kings, you have emirs, and they are the law there. But they tell you that you cannot have kings, and you accept that. And the same can be said with Africa as well. They tell you can't have kings, but they have kings. Is it England that we want to talk about? They have a king now in this 21st century. And you kind of obliterated your monarchy. And I think there is a lot of emotional baggage that comes with obliterating that. Apart from the lies that were told both Africa and India about the disadvantages of monarchy, which they have, by the way, is that they feel the kings betrayed them. Like, what were you looking at when these people came and took them hostage on their own soil and made them slaves on their own soil? Like, you were just there. What did you do? You compromised. Woe betide. Well, the ones that didn't compromise, their people also lost, but at least they are known to, they went down. They didn't just go down. They didn't just submit. They went down fighting, and you have, those who are Indians will know the history of that better, So you had some who compromised, and I think that was where the problem was. If all of them could have put heads together, but they couldn't, because their differences always put them against one another. And while they were fighting amongst themselves as kings from the same region, from the same subcontinent, you had outsiders who were looking at all of them as one and said, wow, what a rich place. The place was glittering, obviously. Do you see how they dress and deck themselves in jewelry, both men and women. Their houses bedecked in jewelries, their temples bedecked in jewelry. So, I mean, if somebody was to have a bird eye view, which outsiders seem to have, of India about maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, that place would be looking like a jewelry site, a gold site or something. It would be shining. It would be shining. And that is all they see, like this shiny place. I want to take the glitter from there. And y'all are there fighting among yourselves. Same thing also with Africa. I know I said I was going to talk about the black race, but I don't see how we can talk about the black people without talking about the Indians, because what we have in common is a lot. Now, I'm not unaware that Indians may not, and that is why I talked about colorism first, because if they have issues with fellow Indians that have dark skin, well, now, what do you think they have for Africans who are from Africa? I mean, because there is Africa, they think that every black person in India is a foreigner, because they feel like every black person comes from Africa. So any black person anywhere in the world, even if these people have been on that soil for thousands of years, you still have people saying they migrated from Africa. Maybe that's true. But migrated or not, I think if you have been in a place for 500 years at least, you have a stake. You are a stakeholder and a shareholder on that land. But unfortunately, black people don't have that kind of right. They're not given that right. They have to fight for it. You find a situation where they are always bullied anywhere they are at. So they see them as strangers who came to occupy the land. But, you know, if you look at history critically, and you look at psychology, basic psychology, you understand that usually it is those who really own the land that are less prone to violence. It is those who have less rights to a location that are the ones who fight the most, because they don't have any ties really. Their interest in that land is the riches of the land. If the land does not have riches, they're not interested. But those who are the soul of the land, which black people are most of the time, they're the soul of most land. It's not that black people are cowards or they don't know how to fight. They know how to fight, but black people, generally speaking, they are not a fan of bloodshed. Generally speaking, I'm not talking about some individuals or some tribes that may seem like they are bloodthirsty and all. But generally speaking, there is a rule that we should try as much as possible not to desecrate the land with blood. But you see, the people who see gold, who see the rich mineral resources on a land, it's like everywhere black people are, there is some riches there, and they don't want black people being there. But at the same time, they cannot do the hard work of getting and reproducing and sustaining these riches. So they are forced, in quotes, to not completely obliterate black people. There are so many stories of how they use black people, like they're trying to find... I'll find a very simple way of putting it. It's like when they know that you are a very strong person, and because you're very strong, they are very afraid of you. For me, all these attacks on black people everywhere in the world, whatever shape or form, I see it as a result of fear. You don't attack somebody you're not afraid of. A person that is not attacking you. Do you understand? And you attacking them, you're a fearful being. And that is why I understand when the Bible says all the fearful will go to hell. Because what people do in the name of fear is horrendous. Fearful people don't just cower in one place. No. Fearful people also try to obliterate their source of fear. And so if black people, the black race is a source of fear to most people, they will do everything and anything to try and remove black people from the face of the earth. And I think that, with this talk of African spirituality and all of that, I think it's from a place of ignorance. Some people have repackaged this African spirituality and made it a thing for Africans, especially especially black people outside of Africa. You have them saying, I don't want to do Christianity anymore. I want to do, like, they feel like they are traitors and all of that. But I think those who are selling African spirituality lied to them, because you cannot divorce Christianity from African spirituality. It's just impossible. It's impossible. It is a known fact that Africa has had close ties with what some people will call the Abraham's descendants, from the time of Joseph, who became the prime minister of Egypt. There is no way that the culture of the Hebrew people did not rub off on some, especially a culture like Egypt or an empire like Egypt that had many idols, many temples, like they just had several idols there. So I think they might be a bit more open to Hebrew way of doing things. Now, it might not become a national phenomenon, but you would have some Egyptians who would look at their lifestyle and actually say, you know what, I think I prefer this lifestyle, and actually copy it. Maybe not publicly, but in secret. So the ties between Christianity, Judaism, and Africa goes way back to that time, if not before then. In fact, way before then, actually. The ties between two cultures have always merged from the very beginning. It has always merged. Like Hagar, I think Hagar was, if I'm not mistaken, was an Egyptian. And she gave birth to a son with Abraham called Ishmael. If that is not a close tie, I don't know what else is. And I think, and this is somebody that God appeared to and said, I will be with this child. This child will not die. So when you have a revelation of your generation becoming a great people, it might be different from the way Jews practice their religion or their culture, but there are a lot of similarities to both. There is not much difference between kosher food and halal. There isn't much difference. I mean, they are the two people in the world, well, except maybe for vegetarians and all of that, but they are the two foremost people who cultures or ethnicities, as it were, or cultures, let's put it that way, religious culture, who had their own tags on food, because there are some things that they did not eat that was forbidden to them, and the things that are forbidden in halal is mostly forbidden in kosher food as well, right? So like there is a difference, but there isn't much of any difference because they all came from the same source. What am I trying to say? If you're here getting obsessed with African spirituality, you would have to go. You cannot remove Christianity from African spirituality. Neither can you remove Islam from spirituality, because Hagar, like I said, was an Egyptian, and she gave birth to Ishmael, who they say is the father of the Arabs, or the ancestor of the Arabs. while Isaac is the, shall we say, the ancestor of, that's interesting, Isaac Ishmael, IS. They had both initials, like two first letter of their names are similar. Isaac Ishmael. Interesting. But that's about it. They shared the same father. Different religions, different cultures, but they had the same father. And because they had the same father, different mothers, but the same father, they had a lot of things in common. And Africa is in the midst of all of that. Not to mention that there was a Keturah who was also an African as well, who had children with Abraham. So you want to talk about African spirituality? You cannot remove Abraham from it. You understand? Of course, there are Africans that have absolutely no ties with Abraham. Oh, yes, of course. But then we're talking African spirituality, aren't we? So if you want to really study African spirituality, read your Bible as well. Read the Bible. It's very important. The Quran, maybe too, but since I'm not reading it, I can't really recommend it. But you can also read it if you are going. I'm not going into African spirituality. I'm sticking with Christianity. Because I believe that Christianity is there is something the Bible talks about. The word of God, which is the Bible, is the sword of the Spirit. And there is a saying in my culture that if you don't have the sword of justice, something like that, you can't ask of the death that killed your father. So there are so many things that has so many mysterious, suspicious demises in the African culture that is connected from within, but it also came from the outside. I know I digressed a lot because where I was going was that now that there is a lot of unity among Black people right now, before they used to tell us bad things about one another. They would tell us that African Black Americans were all sort of things. I'm not even going to repeat it, but they were not good things. And so we believed them. And so every time we travel abroad, we don't acknowledge them, we ignore them, we boycott them, we avoid them. You know, even up till now, you have parents tell them, don't relate with Black Americans. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? What is wrong with you people? Why would you even say that? Who told you they were that? Oh, the media. So you believe everything you're told. And it hurts them. And that's why I don't blame them so much when some of them react very negatively and say, well, we're not Africans. Because we are the ones, Africans are the ones who told them that they're not Africans in a condescending way. Like we just parrot. That's one thing about Africans that we need to change. And I think that it's coming slowly. I hope it comes faster. Is that we feel that when we are told that we are superior to all other Black people, we take it like that. But it's actually a way to rob you further. When anyone tells you that you are more superior than other Black people, is a trick to rob you. And because you are a proud person, you also take that. You don't look at it that if you're brown skinned or you're dark skinned, we're from the same family. We're from a large family. Diverse, yeah, I mean, geez, we're all different in our own unique way. But you see, what we have in common is enough to keep us together. And isn't it amazing that it was Black Americans. I'll always respect those people because they did things that we as Black people on the continent can't do. And I think the invasion and the looting that happened from the outside on the African continent affected Africans within the continent more than it affected the ones that were shipped, dragged in chains out of the continent. Yes, there's still some level of, trauma going on for them, but we are all traumatized by what happened. A lot of us are still in that trauma. Look, as a Christian, when you go deep into spiritual warfare, you realize that what happened was very spiritual as well. It wasn't before they landed on the African soil, whoever they are, landed on the African soil, they abused the hospitality and see, here is the thing. We have that in common with Indians too. Indians believe that strangers, foreigners are gods, in the sense that they treat them with utmost respect. They give them the best of what they have in terms of hospitality, make sure they are well cared for, And so they saw that. They used that to infiltrate, because they're not just there for holidays. They're there to come and rob the place blind. And so they, not suspecting what was going on, would just open their homes, their lives, and then they had these spies infiltrate them, look at their weak spots, and then launch an attack on them. Imagine somebody you gave your bed to, gave them the best dishes in your house, served them yourself. All of a sudden, as you are laughing and having a conversation, they just get up and slit your throat and then rob you. That was exactly what happened. Same thing with Africa as well. We, up till now, if you're a foreigner, you're a stranger, we just have it in our blood. We might be mean to one another in quote. And it's interesting, isn't it? You have some non-blacks pontificate about how black people are always against themselves. But they don't talk about how we are hospitable to strangers. That the reason they could come in to rule over us in the first place was because we do not treat them the same way we treat ourselves. No. They don't talk about that. They talk about how we are mean to ourselves, and that is why they had to come and civilize us. Are you kidding? Really? You call somebody who gave you the best in hospitality, you call them all kinds of names. What does that make you? I don't really bother much about them, because what's there to bother about? When you are inhumane, I don't see you as a human being. I see you as an alien, really, because if you are inhumane, you're a bully, you're a thief, and you talk like one, there's no conversation, nothing to talk about, So I'll just talk to my people. I'm glad, and I think the reason why there was a movement, before I forget again, I think the reason why there was a movement from where you have prominent figures from the Black American culture coming to see what was in the continent was because some people, blacks especially, kept saying, if you don't like it in America, you can go to Africa. And they kept saying that. And I know for a fact that works the opposite. And I'll tell you why. I remember when my first time of going to live with somebody else, who was my mother's friend. I didn't know much about her, but the only time I heard about her was when my mother would say, look, if you don't behave yourself, if you don't act right, I'll just send you to this woman. I'll just send you to her. And she kept repeating it. Why aren't you doing this every time? And one day I just said, you know what? I'm going there. And the tone changed. Why? Are you serious? I'm like, I'm going there. You understand? I'm going there. that was, and I went there and I saw, well, it wasn't a nice experience. Let's just put it that way. But unlike that, the black people, the black Americans who came to Africa, they've mostly had fantastic experiences. They can see that the media has lied to them. The mainstream media has lied to them. Just as they are telling us that black Americans are whatever, the nasty things they say about them, it's also the same way they are telling them that we in Africa, we all live in huts. We all live in thatch roof. We don't have good roads at all. We don't have modern houses at all. We don't have technology at all. We live with animals. We don't wear clothes. Can you imagine someone still portraying that? And oh, the latest one. They are still fighting among themselves. They're still killing one another. And they exaggerated that a lot. Then the Ukraine and Russian war started. Ironic, isn't it? Because they always saw wars as a black people thing, as a brown people thing. Like they can't rule themselves, they can't govern themselves, they are always fighting among themselves. All of a sudden, it became a Russian-Ukraine thing happened in our so-called 21st century. These are what you will call civilized crimes. And such a thing happened there. And this time around, they could not very well say it was a black or brown person that started the fight. The only time they needed us, though, was for us to come and fight for them. And the thing is, a lot of black people wanted to do that. But then the racists in Ukraine decided that for Africans, well, at least that's what they did with Nigerians. For Nigerians to come and fight for them, they have to pay. And I'm like, are you kidding? I guess that was where that ended. A lot of black people wanted to go there to fight because they admired the stance of the Ukrainian president. And they felt like if we only had a president like that, if we only had leaders like that in Africa, there will be a lot of difference here. And they felt, you know what, it's better to fight with these people than to just stay here, you know. And that's the thing. We black people, we're not very good at counting our blessings. And the ones who seem to count their blessings, they are oblivious to the painful realities. So it's like you have one that is always focused on the pain, and the one that ignores the pain and lies that the pain is not there. And you find some black people, you know, also hyping the idea that the African continent was just a chaos. Everything was just upside down there. And some said, you know what, what's the worst that can happen? You know, because when people complain that, look, why is it that black people are being targets of police brutality and all of that? And what some people's response to that is, if you don't like it here, you can go back to Africa. And some of them said, you know what, I think I would just have to really go there. What's the worst that can happen? You know, what's the worst that can happen if I go back to Africa? It can't be as bad. I'm sorry. I had to check what I had on the stove. It can't be as bad as, you know, seeing a police as a black person and wondering if that is the last time you will see your family. You know? They're like, I need a break from this because this is really getting too much. And they went and they're like, hold on a second. You guys have modern buildings here. I think I'm partly grateful to mainstream media for their exaggerated lies about Africans on all sides, trying to pitch us against one another. I'm kind of grateful in a way because it has backfired in the sense that we don't have grand expectations. Like, our expectation of one another is so low that now we are pleasantly surprised when we meet each other. We now see our Black Americans and say, well, you're not as bad as they say you are. So they have made both of us look like we live in dirt day in, day out. And then we now see that, no, you're not a pig, actually. You're a modern person. You speak well. You're educated. You have a job. And oh my goodness, you don't live with animals. You don't live on trees. You actually have houses. My goodness, you have schools. I mean, of course, there are some schools that don't look all that, but you actually have beautiful schools. So the expectation is not so high. They're like, I want to see for myself what is going on. Some of them thought, what, maybe a village life is what I need. And they got here and they're like, there is urban life as well as village life. And even the village life is so beautiful in its own self. So yes, I'm partly grateful. I know that was not their intention, because all those, if you don't like it here, you can go back to Africa. They kind of became silent now, because I know that they know now that if they say that again, there'll be a mass exodus of Black people from the Americas, from other parts of the world, trooping into Africa. Especially when some African presidents have said, please, you're welcome. This is your home. You can come in here anytime. We have a place for you. And you've had a few Americans who have actually moved to Africa and decided to stay there. I guess sometimes they might travel to the West every now and again, but their home base is now in Africa. And a lot of them are now trying to build businesses in Africa and all of that stuff. Although, frankly speaking, that was not even the main reason why we invited them, right? We invited them because this is their place. They were snatched from here. And we miss them, We want them back here to touch ground with where they were from, right? And there is always a place for them here. They are welcome at any time, you understand? And those who told bad stories, tattletale, told horrible stories about us to one another, they now wish they had kept their mouth shut. I'm glad they didn't. That is how God works. God would make the wisdom of those who think they are wise become foolishness. Like they think they are smart. Because what they did seemed to be working, but all of a sudden it's no longer working. It turned. And they're not like, how? Well, when God, whose name is Jehovah, has decided that he has had enough of your shenanigans, that is what happens. And this is just the beginning. And no, if you think this is just, this is now business unusual, it will no longer be business as usual. Because here is the thing, there is no trick you want to pull that God does not even know that you're about to pull. And so he will let you pull that trick. And every trick you pull will always boomerang on you. It's just me warning you. You might take it if you want, you might not take it if you don't want. But there are so many lessons to learn. For me, the lessons I've learned is it's good to keep your individuality, but what you have in common with other people, especially when you have the same experiences with strangers. As Black people, I think keeping our individuality, our ethnicity, our culture, those things are wonderful. I think they are. But I also think that we should build bridges among ourselves and have a united, something that unifies us, have a united front, have a united kind of security and protection structure that would prevent another kind of invasion, because we thought that we were now in the 21st century. What happened back then will never happen. But you see, this thing is in the blood. If you are naturally a thief and you like to take things that don't belong to you, it doesn't matter what century you are in. Which is why some people are just racists. Even you have some children who are racist. They say they make racial slurs at their black teachers. I really did not think that the reason they do that is because their parents sat them down and told them that black people should be disrespected. No, I think it's just in their blood, period. And so when they just see a black person, the worst in them just comes out, and they just become these little demons. And a lot of them just grow up and become little demons as well. So it's in the blood. It doesn't matter what century we are in. It doesn't matter what technology we have. Technology does not clean the blood of prejudice. If you're a prejudiced person, your iPhone is not going to clean that out of you. If you're a biased person, your iPhone, your education, you might be a professor and be racist. What am I even saying? I mean, I don't know them personally, but I know there are some that just don't like the sight of brown people or black people. The education, Western education, does not cure you of bad behavior. It does not. And so if you understand that as black people, we understand that we need to build a protective network around ourselves as black people. We need to do that. The Indians have tried that. Yes, their systems are not perfect, but I think the security is what they focused on first. And I believe that they are dealing with other issues that separate them and keep them distracted, that could be a distraction to external threats. They are also dealing with those issues as well. Because for everything you people disagree on, it weakens the unity of a people. And sometimes there are just some things that you just overlook. Because when you look at the bigger picture, it's not really that important. In fact, it's not important. All right, then. I need to get going. For now, thank you so much for listening up to this point. I appreciate it. Any messages, thoughts, please send a voice message to this podcast, from whatever platform you're listening from. Remember to guard your heart with all diligence, for out of it flows the issues of life. If each one can teach one, then each one can teach one. What a better nation, what a better world we will live in. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, you're your brother and your sister's keeper. So show love just because. And that quote is from Chaz B, a wonderful presenter of blessed memory. And now this following scriptures, it says, they that know their God, they shall be strong and they shall do exploit. God has not given us the spirit of fear. That's in Timothy. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Shalom.